let's get to the news of the day. And we saw some of Mike Mayock, the Raiders GM, on the front end. He spoke to reporters, and we're going to play some of it coming up. I want to start, though, with Carl Nassib, the first openly gay player in league history to actually play in a regular season game. He came out last June, and he requested and received a personal day as he's processing the events related to Jon Gruden. And I see a couple of issues here, Myles. First, Carl Nassib is going to be inundated with questions when he shows up. And there's a certain irony to this, and it's an unfortunate irony, because when Michael Sam came out in 2014, one of the misguided, old-school, outdated mindsets was it's going to create a distraction because all of his teammates are going to be asked questions about Michael Sam. And, some coaches don't want distractions, so they don't want Michael Sam. Well, now, because of the distraction created by Jon Gruden, Carl Nassib's going to be asked all these questions about Jon Gruden that he shouldn't have to answer to. And that part of it, to me, is unfortunate, but it's also unavoidable.
Yeah, it is unavoidable. And, look, the entire premise of, I think, what Carl Nassib was wanting to have today makes a lot of sense to me. And I also saw the point made on Twitter that, maybe if you're talking about a black player, right? A black player should have maybe been able to request and also have a personal day just based on everything that was going on, because it started with the racist comment and a racist trope. And, we don't know whether or not a black player wanted or was granted or not granted a personal day or anything like that. But I think one of the points that Mike Mayock made, and I don't know if we're going to play this clip or not, but is that there's a community of black players, whereas there's only one. Carl Nassib, and it's one of one. So frankly, I very much understand the need for a personal day from his standpoint when all of this stuff has come out.
And by way of background, for anyone that may have missed this detail or has already forgotten it, given the avalanche of details we've been sifting through the past 2 days, one of the emails that Jon Gruden sent to former Washington president Bruce Allen that was given to the Raiders and then leaked by someone to the New York Times included Gruden questioning the commissioner allegedly striking a deal with former Rams coach Jeff Fisher to use a late-round pick on Michael Sam so that Sam would not go undrafted, because that would be a bad look for the NFL, because to the average fan, you would think the guy who was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year would be drafted in the first 7 rounds, even though at some point it's more advantageous to pick where you're going to start your NFL career rather than be drafted in round 7. They wanted him to be drafted. Jon Gruden didn't like that. Jon Gruden made that clear, and Jon Gruden used a derogatory term to refer to a gay person in articulating his thoughts to Bruce Allen. So, that said, Myles, I want to mention something now that I talked about yesterday with Shireen as it relates to Rich Bisaccia becoming the interim head coach. Because even though Gruden is gone, if you're Carl Nassib or if you're any of the black players on that team, why should you regard Rich Bisaccia any differently than you would have regarded Jon Gruden? Because Jon Gruden gave you no outward reason to think that there was anything amiss. And the only difference between Gruden and Bisaccia is we don't have access to Bisaccia's email account. So I think that for the players who are stunned and saddened by what's gone on, there's a trust factor that needs to be rebuilt toward the entire organization, toward the entire structure, whether it's the Raiders or some other team. And this may not be unique to the Raiders, but it would be most prevalent with the Raiders. Whoever is in the position of authority post-Gruden, I think there's an inclination to look at him and say, what do you think about me? And I think Carl Nassib, who is one of one, as you said, is the one who is most likely to look at Rich Bisaccia and say, you and Gruden were friends for a long time. I wonder if you feel the same way about me, too. And how can I believe you if you tell me I don't feel that way? Because Jon Gruden told me those things, too.
Yeah, that's really tough. And it's something that, as I think about it, I don't know how I would deal with that. I really don't, And like we're saying, he's one of one, and there's not necessarily somebody else that he can go to in the locker room and be like, hey, man, what else do you really know about X person when in regards to Y? It's just, that's really tough. And, I feel for Carl Nassib in that way, but I think we have to think about this from a really wide perspective, too, where it's how do we know anything about the people that we have to trust in order to do our jobs, right? We only know what people tell us, what people show us when we are present with them. And, you know, when it's like the Maya Angelou line, right? When somebody shows you who they are, you got to believe them and believe them the first time. And so it's hard to really know who people are before they actually introduce themselves to us. And especially in this case, that's going to be tough to deal with.
When you are dealing with the person who was close with Gruden and who becomes the right-hand man, he was the assistant head coach, and he's plugged into that job. I think it's difficult for Carl Nassib. It may be difficult for some of the other players.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.